Welcome, everyone, to the Success Elevated podcast. As always, I'm your host, Hayden Lee, and I am joined this week by a very special guest. He's a pretty cool guy. I get to work with him just about every single day, which is a lot of fun. Sam Cannon, who's our financial director here at Spot On Solutions. Sam, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Absolutely. I'm happy to be here.
Sam's a local guy like me, and so we're kind of. We'll have to dive into that a little bit. I know you live right here locally. Are you born and raised here in Blackfoot, Idaho?
I am. Yep. Both my wife and I are actually from right here in Blackfoot. So
awesome. Chelsea, we went to high school together. She went to high school with my wife. Like we're small town Blackfoot, man. That's how it goes. So yeah, we're both Blackfoot kids right here, Southeast Idaho. And Sam's been a part of our team for a while now, and we wanted to have him on the podcast to talk about all things finances. I know it's super, super exciting for all of those that are listening, but I think the conversation today, will be super applicable for a lot of our audience, which is cool. So first and foremost, Sam, I'd love for our audience to just get a little bit more familiar with who you are. Let's talk a little bit about your background. I don't know if you kind of want to dive in maybe first to just a little bit about your education and kind of how you got started in the financial world. I know you're kind of in the accountant / CPA world a little bit, but let's talk a little bit about all that.
Yeah. So I went to college here in Southeast Idaho at BYU, Idaho. And initially I was going to study biology. I really was interested in going to medical school, but I couldn't quite figure out what exactly that looked like for me. And so my dad is actually a tax accountant, and I was talking to him one day and he said, you know what, you should take an accounting class and see if you like it. And I'd taken a couple of business classes before this and had really enjoyed it, and took my first accounting class, and everything just kind of clicked for me. And so from then on, I was an accounting major and got my accounting degree at BYU, Idaho. And then after I graduated from BYU, Idaho, I worked for a little while and decided I wanted to get my MBA. And so I got my MBA through Idaho State University, which is also here in Southeast Idaho. So that's a little bit about my education. And then my career, I guess, professionally, in between my time at BYU, Idaho, and my time at ISU, I went down to Dallas, Texas, and worked as an auditor for an accounting firm down there, which was awesome. It opened my eyes to a lot of big business and big number accounting. And I worked closely with oil and gas companies to audit their financials, and was able to see a lot of the transactional day-to-day type stuff, and also the big picture financial statement type accounting. And then from there, since both my wife and I are from here in Blackfoot, we wanted to move a little closer to our families. And so we packed up and brought our Subaru back to Southeast Idaho. And I worked for the Idaho National Laboratory for about 4 years. And then there I was a planning and financial control specialist. So I supported the budgets and the finances for a few different divisions, but mainly what I emphasized was financial budgeting and planning for construction projects at the site. And then from there, I moved into the accounting world and worked as a fund accountant and as a controller and a CFO for a meat packing plant and for different ranches, bison ranches and cattle ranches that are here in Southeast Idaho. And from there, I came here to Spot On Solutions and the financial director. So
that's awesome, man. There's so many different routes I want to go because I think you've had such a cool career. I'd love to spend. I mean, we could spend a whole podcast just talking about what it was working in, those big organizations, places like, working in the government, the Idaho National Lab. But I really want to pick your brain a little bit about being a controller or a CFO for a bison ranch. I think that to me sounds pretty dang cool. What was kind of some interesting, was there any kind of interesting challenges around that? I mean, bison for those people that don't know, like farm raised bison are probably, I mean, other than they're a little bit more dangerous, it's probably not much different than like a cattle ranch, right? But I guess what was cool about working for a place like that as a CFO?
Yeah. So uh, being at the bison ranches is really a different experience. Going from the INL to government funded, government supported programs into a ranch style business is pretty interesting because cash is way different at the
Yeah,
INL. The government, with almost any project that is deemed necessary or approved by the government, they'll fund it. And at a bison ranch, it's very similar to cattle ranches. In fact, I mean, they go hand in hand in a lot of ways, but cash flow is very different, very difficult to come by because you run on such tight margins and you know your business operates the way that the market does. And if the market's good, then your cash flow looks good. And if the market's not good for meat or feed or anything, then it can really impact your business. And so it was exciting. I really enjoyed it. There were times I was able to go out to the ranches and get hands on, and that was a lot of fun to get out of the office. As an accountant,
yeah,
that's kind of 99% of your life is sitting in an office, but being able to get out on the ranches was a lot of fun. And so I really enjoyed my time with those ranches.
that's cool. The cash flow question is, man, it's something I think that's always on any business owner's mind. And I feel like it really is applicable in the restoration world. And so I want to come back to that a little bit because I think maybe even I'm very, very similar to ranching. It sounds like at times you're dealing with very, very tight margins. And then you got to throw in the wrinkle of like also dealing with insurance and how delayed some payments can be and all of that. So I want to talk more about that because I think you'll have some cool thoughts on that. But I want to dive in just because it's April. It's we're this podcast is going to go live on April 5th, so we're still technically in tax season, although it's rapidly approaching the end. I'd love to hear a little bit from you. As people are kind of wrapping up their taxes, especially in the small business world. Kind of just directing it to our audience. What can people maybe do a little differently if tax season was rough on you this year, as I'm sure it was for a lot of people? If tax season was rough this year as a small business owner, what are some things that you feel like people can do to better prepare for next tax season and further on?
Yeah, great question. So the biggest thing with taxes and small business is you don't want to be reactive to your
Yeah.
tax situation. So many small businesses that I've seen get caught up in really the reactive side of taxes instead of being proactive. And they'll go to their accountant the day before their tax return is due and say, hey, I need to file an extension, and what can we throw in to decrease our taxes this year? And working with that, really there's not much you can do. So the best thing to do is to get ahead of it and to think about it. Think about your 2024 tax situation today so that over the next few months you can really try to set a plan for your taxes. And I can talk a little bit about maybe what that looks like and a few levers that you can pull to manage that. But one of the biggest things when it comes to trying to be proactive with your taxes and just with your finances in general, in my opinion, and maybe I'm a little biased with this, but I see so much value in having an experienced and a professional accountant who's doing your books. I've seen a lot of business owners who think that they can do it themselves. And then once it gets too much for them to handle, their books get really far behind. And, once tax season or something else comes around, they're trying to get a loan at a bank or something, they decide, you know what, I need to get an accountant to help me clean this up. So that I can go and get this loan, or so that I can get my financials to my tax accountant. And um, when you do that and you haven't had an experienced bookkeeper or accountant managing your books, then the cleanup of books is really difficult. And so hiring a bookkeeper or an accountant to do your books throughout the whole year is really, really valuable to you and your business. A couple other things that you can do: manage so kind of with the cash flow scenario, a lot of taxes are based off of your income. So
Yeah.
you want to manage your expenses to your income. So if you expect to have a high income period of time, whether that's a year or a month or a quarter, then maybe you should look at investing some of your additional income towards capital assets, trying to invest in your business, trying to put some of that money back into the business, back into your employees, so that you can try and bring down your taxable income. That's always something that I think is good. But again, in order to be able to do that, you need to be proactive. You need to know what's coming. And so if you're trying to be reactive and you're waiting till the last second to try and make a decision or to see where you're at, then it can put you in a tough spot.
Yeah. I've seen so many funny, I mean, I don't want to, I guess they're not funny, but I see so many stories. I mean, it's easy for a friggin' multi-billionaire to do this, but I see, stories like this on the internet all the time of like, oh, it was a week before, the end of our fiscal year. And so I went and bought a private jet and that's how we took care of it. And it's like, okay, not everybody has the capability to do that. And so like you're saying, like it's get rid of some of the headache and just be proactive about it and prepare and be like, hey, we know got some good income coming in. We're doing really well revenue wise. Let's take care of some of these things. Let's renovate our building. Let's buy some more trucks. Let's go buy some more equipment to make our lives easier. It's going to make our employees' jobs easier, but also get rid of some of that taxable income, or at least bring that down a little bit, which would be super, super helpful.
Yeah, and also one other thing with that. So if you know, I would talk to a tax accountant, talk to whoever does your taxes, and ask them about certain credits, because there are credits that you can take, and you can prepare for. But in order to prepare for that, you probably should talk to your accountant. Let them know what your goals are. Let them know what your plans are for the next year, 2 years, 5 years. If you do have a building and you've never had or heard of a cost segregation study, go talk to your accountant. See if that's something that would make sense for you and your company. Those are things. Being able to take those credits are great, and there's many of them available to small businesses. But to do that, you've got to know ahead of time. You've got to have a plan so that you can really set aside time and prepare for it.
Yeah. I think this leads perfectly, Sam, into the question, having a plan. How do we take care of these things? I think it leads perfectly into the cash flow conversation. We hear it all the time in the restoration world and in the cleaning world, and in the people that we work with the most. The cash is king, and you've got to find a way to make sure you've got good, positive cash flow. Restoration, it's probably even more challenging than a lot of industries because of the insurance wrinkle. And so, maybe taking that out of the equation, because it's hard to really predict with certain insurances and stuff. Taking that out of the equation, what are some ways that a restoration business owner, a business owner in general, can help manage their cash flow a little bit better to help make sure that they can make payroll, or maybe make those purchases for new equipment if they've got some old broken equipment? How do they manage their cash flow a little bit better?
That's a great question. So I'm going to kind of take a step back and talk for a second. I'm going to kind of build off of what we just talked about, as far as like having a bookkeeper or an accountant that is keeping your stuff up to date. One of the biggest challenges that I see with businesses who are trying to, or maybe they're struggling with cash flow, is they don't understand why that's happening.
Mm,
They don't know within their business what is it that's holding me back from collecting faster, or what are the areas of my business that seem to suck cash out of, our business, and how do I manage that? How do I change that? Um, in the financial world, and this is the same for any industry out there. This is a business solution, but being able to have um, well managed financial practices and well managed processes, I guess, operations
yeah.
is really important, because in order to understand where your problems are with your cash flow, you need data. Unless you really understand your business, which there are a lot of people that do, but unless you really understand every detail of your business, you can't always trust that uh, maybe it's just a gut reaction to what you think you're losing cash with. What is sucking my cash? What area of my business is most profitable? Where are the areas that I don't make any money? In order to answer those types of questions, you need to have data to support it. If you don't have the data to support answers to those questions, then it's just a guess. And you're going to be guessing to try and find solutions until you find what's right. And the quickest way to turn cash flow around is to understand, I have real-time data telling me that this area of my business is not producing cash, or it's taking too much of my cash. And so one of the best things with improving cash flow is understanding your operations uh, all throughout your business, and making sure that they are telling the story of where your cash is going and where it's coming from, so that you can then identify areas that need improvement. Um, there's a million ways that we could go with that, but
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers your question
Oh,
totally, or
no,
if
it
you
totally
want to
does.
follow up on that.
Totally does. Cause again, the common thing that I think people go back to is they just don't have systems in place to accurately manage that cash flow there. And to your other point, if they're not fully involved in all the day-to-day operations, they're just like, man, why don't every time we come to payroll, we're scrounging in order to put everything together to pay our employees? Like, something is happening. And if you don't have systems in place, it's going to be really hard to identify the problem. And I think even beyond that, I think what you're saying, we have some great affiliate partners here at Spot On Solutions. One example being like One Claim Solution. Like, this is what they help restoration business owners do all the time. They're using their knowledge to advocate to the insurance agencies to help them make sure that they're getting paid faster and all of this. One of the big things that they talk about, that I think you've kind of highlighted here as well, is like the systems thing. Like, you have to make sure you are accurately tracking everything in order to get paid faster. And restoration is no different. Like, if you want the insurance to pay out on a claim faster, like, you have to have all of your I's dotted and your T's crossed, and good documentation. You're taking pictures, you're tracking expenses, you're tracking how long your team was at the job, and all of, like, you have to track all of that stuff. And not only does that help you get paid faster from the insurance, it just helps you know, okay, how much is a job like this actually costing us? Because if you think a job costs $500 and you're getting paid $501, like, there's an issue there with regards to positive cash flow. And so I just think there's so many good things that you said there. And I think the biggest thing that I always come back to is you've got to have systems in place, and those systems allow you to track things and build data. And then that data allows you to make solutions, or create solutions, or, solve problems. We talk about it all the time that problem solving should be data driven. There's obviously got to be some creativity and some brainstorming and some teamwork and working together and coming up with goals and big ideas. But every decision that you make as a business owner should be data driven. And if you don't have good data, you're not going to be able to make good decisions.
Yeah. And really, the way that I look at it, data is feedback to how your business is running. And if imagine trying to make decisions to help your business if you weren't receiving any feedback on how you were doing.
Yeah.
It's all a guess.
Yeah.
And until you have data-driven solutions, I mean that you're spinning your wheels. You're going to waste a lot of time trying to improve a process that you don't know. You know, if you have no data to support
Yep.
the decisions you're making, then it's really hard to find a solution to that.
The Success Elevated podcast is brought to you by SOS Navigator. SOS Navigator is an on-demand training platform geared towards marketing, personal development, and business growth. We understand that as a business owner in the service industry, you wear a million hats. Let SOS Navigator be a simple and cost-effective way for you to continue to grow your business. Click the link in the show notes below and use code SOS Podcast to get 10% off your next on-demand training course.
The next thing that I feel like, it's a challenge that is also a part of this, that, sometimes in the restoration world, there's not always the problem of dealing with insurance. Sometimes you do a job and you have to get paid directly from the customer. And sometimes those conversations can be challenging but you have to have them. Otherwise you're going to have this cash flow problem. It's not something that is necessarily a part of your day to day, but you have had to in your past experiences and just what you kind of work on with the role that you have here at Spot On Solutions, you occasionally have to deal with some of those tougher conversations with customers when it comes to money. Money is never a fun thing to talk about. It's almost like taboo in some, like you're like, oh, you shouldn't bring this up or you shouldn't have this conversation, but you have to. And that's, part of your role here is at times you've got to collect on services that have been rendered. And so, I don't know if you have any thoughts or tips for business owners out there when they have to have those tough conversations, when maybe a client's unhappy or a customer's unhappy, or maybe not even that they're unhappy, that they're just confused about a bill or an invoice. How do you have some of those tougher conversations? Do you have any tips or thoughts or feedback on that?
Yeah, totally. So the first thing that comes to my mind is the invoice probably shouldn't be the first time that a customer is finding something out about what's happening.
Yeah.
The invoice really should be something that, the services that are included on it and what they are being invoiced for. Really, that's not like the first step of communication in a job, like in trying to get payment for a job. The expectations should be set well ahead of the invoice to know what is going to be on it and how it's going to look. Now, I know that's not always the case. There's a lot of variables that come in with that. So the next best thing that can happen is having open communication through the whole process, being able to let the customer know what's happening. If you're going to be over budget on a job and you haven't communicated that to a customer yet, then you probably need to communicate with the customer before you go over budget, or else there's going to be an issue and someone's going to be upset about it. So communication is huge, and letting a customer know ahead of time before they receive an invoice, or being able to just make them aware of what's happening, can help save a lot of headache. And then we've already touched on this a little bit, but I think one of the biggest things and one of the best things that you can do as a business owner who's, has a customer that's fighting an invoice, if you have support that shows what you've done, the work that you've done for whatever's being billed on the invoice, if you can show time cards, if you can show receipts, if you can show, proof that what you put into the job makes sense to turn around and invoice to the customer, then that type of proof can really, it just adds, some weight behind the invoice itself. And so if you can do both of those things at the same time, have open communication with the customer, keep them up to speed with, everything that's going on before they get invoiced, so that when they do get invoiced, even if they still have questions, you can go to them and say, hey, here's the records of this piece of the invoice and why it's this much. Then at that point, there will always be customers who want to fight an invoice and they want to nickel and dime to try and get the invoices as low as possible so they don't have to pay as much. You're always going to run into that. But if you can support the evidence that makes up your invoice and communicate that with the customer, then that helps save a lot of headache in the future when they do get the invoice.
Yeah, I love that. Again, it kind of comes back to your original theme of like being proactive. Like if you're if you're proactive about some of that stuff and are good about communicating, and you're communicating it beforehand and after and everything, it's going to be very, very simple to address those concerns when they come up. Because even if you do all of those things, there's still going to be customers that are going to bring up concerns or whatever, and that's fine. But if you've documented everything, if you were proactive in communication, if you notified them that, hey, there's going to be a bill coming up or whatever, like it's going to get rid of a lot of the headache in the long run.
And maybe one more piece to that. Because this happens a lot too. Be willing to accept when you mess something up. Like,
that's great.
Don't always project onto the customer, if something doesn't go right. But if you do mess something up and it isn't caught until after the customer catches it, don't be afraid to say, yeah, that was my bad. I messed up on that. Because I think that adds more to, I guess, your character and trying to make things even and fair. And it doesn't always have to go, not all the blame has to be pushed to one side or the other. It's okay to accept sometimes you messed up and you gotta make things right. So
yeah, that's awesome. Something as simple. I've had conversations with customers where something as simple as just being like, hey, yeah, you're right. We got to correct that. Or I'm sorry, we messed that up. We're going to get that fixed for you. Like something as simple as that in a situation that you have. You don't have to apologize for something if you didn't actually make a mistake, but if you did, don't be afraid to own up to it. And sometimes that can patch up a relationship faster than anything else, So I love that. That's a great piece there. Sam, this has been awesome. This has been a great conversation. I think it's been eye-opening for me. I know it's going to be eye-opening for our audience. I guess kind of the final thing that I had before we jump into the last questions that we ask everybody is, at what point, I don't know if it's a threshold number, if it's a revenue or number of employees or whatever. But I feel like a lot of small business owners are, like outsourcing to an accountant, or, they're working with somebody else to kind of handle, at least they should be. You'd be surprised how many, or well, maybe you wouldn't be surprised because this is your world, but there's a lot of people out there that are trying to keep their books by hand on pieces of paper and stuff. It's crazy. But for those people that are outsourcing, that are having other people do it, at what point do you feel like it would be necessary to maybe bring some of that in-house and hire somebody, hire a Sam Cannon to be their director of finance? What is there a certain point or reference that you have for something like that where it's like, hey, you guys have gotten big enough, it's probably time to bring somebody in?
Yeah. So in my opinion, I can't say that there's like a revenue number.
Right.
But what I would say is if keeping your books up to date is taking time away from you being able to, add value to your business, then you need to hand that off to somebody else.
Love it.
You're better off to pay somebody who can help do it, part-time or, eventually maybe full-time, but you're better off to pay somebody else who specializes in that to do it than you are to try and do it yourself and save money and take time away from your business where you could be adding value to what you're good at. And so if your bookkeeping and your accounting is taking time away from that, then it's absolutely time to get somebody in, whether it's in-house or get somebody part-time to help you take care of that. Because you add way more value to your business doing what you specialize in than you do when you stay up late trying to get your books in order right before tax season.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Filing extensions and doing all that. Yeah. That's awesome, man. That's yeah, that's a great way to sum it up. Like, and it goes for anything, not just like accounting and taking care of your books. Like, I personally, Hayden would not be a good accountant. And so I'm not going to try and keep the books for Spot On Solutions. And that's why we have somebody like Sam. I have talents that I'm going to use elsewhere. Right. And so like, if if you're identifying that, hey, these are taking, keeping your books and maintaining this is keeping you from doing other things that would help your business grow more, then yeah, find someone to step in and help that and take care of that for you. Even if it's just somebody to come and do it part-time, like that can make all the difference. So,
yeah. And you know what? It's okay to even find somebody before you get to that point.
Yeah. That's true. Don't wait to make that change until you're panicked and stressing out. So yeah, that's a good call. Being proactive. Hey, that's the theme of this podcast. We're going back to being proactive, man. Love it. Thank you again, Sam. This was super insightful for me and our audience. I appreciate your thoughts on some of these things. I'd love to kind of wrap up by asking the same 3 questions we ask all of our guests. I know you're going to have some cool things for this, but I'd love to start. First and foremost, favorite book or podcast that you've read or listened to recently, or maybe that you've read or listened to in the past that you just really loved.
Yeah. So a book that I always go back to is a book called Can't Hurt Me it was written by a man named David Goggins.
David Goggins, man, that guy is an animal.
Yeah, he's a beast. And I find a lot of inspiration to just like continue to push forward. It's never too late to try and change your life, or it's never too late to try and make something right. And that book has brought me, countless amounts of just inspiration and energy to just go out there every day and grind and be okay with grinding and taking my time to just do things right. So that's always a book that I go back to.
That's awesome. Great answer. That's honestly such a good book. I'm surprised it hasn't been recommended for. That's the first time I've had somebody recommend some other books that are like very similar and close to that. But yeah, that's awesome. Can't Hurt Me. The first time I heard of him is he came on a podcast. He came on like Joe Rogan podcast and talked about the book and talked about his life. And gosh, he's crazy in a good way. He is the craziest guy in like an awesome, cool, inspiring way. So yeah, that's a good one. Second question. I know you're obviously our financial director here at Spot On Solutions, but within that you wear a lot of hats and do a lot of things, and there can be some long days. So, how do you relax at the end of a long day? How do you recharge the mental and emotional batteries?
Yeah. So this is probably the most common answer that you get, and that's okay. But yeah, I love going home to my family. So I grew up in a family with 6 sisters and no brothers. And then my wife and we have 2 daughters, and we just had a son a year ago. And being able to go home and just, see them and be with them gives me just, the re-energizing that I need every day to remind myself, tomorrow I'm waking up, I'm going to go back to work so that I can provide for them. And that's, for me, just being with them does it for me. Just gives me everything I need. So
that's awesome. Great answer. And there's, we get a lot of that answer because it's true. I mean, it's how people take care of themselves. And gosh, we've had people talk about it on this podcast, and I can't remember who the originator of it is from, but like, you've got to find your why. And that's how a lot of people, recharge, is going back and seeing their why, who they're doing this all for. And so, yeah, I love it, man. Last question. And again, you can kind of take this whatever direction you want, but if you could rewind and, say one thing to younger Sam, and you can rewind to the Bison days or the days working at the INL or whatever. But if you could rewind and tell younger Sam one thing, what would that one thing be?
I think it would just be to enjoy each moment, enjoy the process of growth and development, because there's been times in my life where I've looked ahead and I'm like, man, I can't wait till I'm at this point. I can't wait till, I get to do this, or, I think we all do it. We all have things that we look forward to and things that we want to have now. But through that, and I'm still young, I'm still early in my career and I have a long ways to go. But looking back to myself 10 years ago, I would say, man, just enjoy every day, just everything that you do, even if it's difficult, even if it stretches you, if it challenges you, don't get frustrated, but just learn from it and enjoy it, because, there's a time when I was able to skip class and go hunting and spend, a day out fishing or doing what I wanted to do. And that time is come and gone. But, we all experience just things every day that may challenge us, and enjoy it. Find something to learn from it. And for me, I'm still trying to teach myself that, but just enjoy the process of development and learn from everything, and it'll make you or me, I'm talking to myself, it would make me better for my future self to just enjoy every moment.
Oh, it's awesome. What a great way to close it out, Sam. Thanks again for coming on. This was super, super awesome. I obviously get to rub shoulders and work with you on a daily basis. We have a cool opportunity here that we have a lot of employees that work from home and work from the office, and we obviously get to have you in a few days a week, which is great. And then you get to work from home and spend time with your family. And it's been awesome working with you, and I look forward to a lot more success in the future. And we'll probably have to have you on again to talk more about all things director of finance land. So appreciate you coming on, Sam.
Hey, thanks, Hayden. Love working with you, man.
This has been Success Elevated, making you a little bit better one show at a time. Thanks for joining us. Please subscribe on YouTube or any other major podcast platform to listen to more episodes. We are proudly brought to you by Spot On Solutions. If you'd like to learn more about how we can help you grow your business, please check us out at spotonsolutions.com.